Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. My name is Andrew Claudio, a.k.a. GMAC, and it is time to move on from that heartbreaker last night against the Chicago Bulls and preview two matchups against little brother across the borough who may have a chance to do some laughing at us over this weekend. A matchup on Friday night at 7:30 and then on Sunday night at 7 p.m. Interesting schedule you got there, NBA. The Knicks play the Nets for the first time since a blockbuster trade this summer brought Mikal Bridges to the New York Knicks and almost all the picks. They had one left over to send to Minnesota for Karl-Anthony Towns, but 4 first-round picks unprotected. I think 1 or 2 pick swaps. And then a Milwaukee pick that looks amazing at the moment. If you told me before the season, specifically after the Cat trade, the worst case scenarios, the last thing I would have thought of is that there would be worries about Mikal Bridges 11 games in. And of course, the person I have to bring on, because maybe I owe him one when it comes to getting a chance to laugh at Knicks fans on this side of things. Joining me now to preview these matchups from WFAN Afternoons with Evan and Tiki, Evan Roberts. Welcome to the Knicks Film School Pregame Show. I don't even know how to ask this question without already knowing the answer and just setting you up. But how are you, sir?
I'm okay. Thank you very much for asking. I've enjoyed the start of this NBA season. It's been very stress-free. It's been very enjoyable. I feel very freed as a basketball fan. So thank you for asking. I hope you've enjoyed the first part of this season as well.
So these pregame pods that we've now switched to live, there's usually a segment that I switch to where I ask my out-of-town guest, like, what were your thoughts about the Knicks offseason? The 2 big trades that they made that shook up the NBA world. And with you, it's a little different because we know your thoughts. We did an entire pod right after the trade for Mikal Bridges was done. So I know your thoughts there. And I'm sure anybody that listens to Knicks Film School has probably heard your thoughts about the Karl-Anthony Towns trade in the New York area. So we're actually going to start there because I alluded to it in the intro. So when you're going through like your preview of the season, Evan, and you're laying out scenarios, your projections, like I had them winning over 50 games. I was very optimistic about what the ceiling of this team could be. And I tried to think of the worst case scenarios. Like, okay, maybe Cat's defense is worse than I thought. Maybe there's a bad injury, like Jalen Brunson got hurt last year. Maybe they depleted the depth too much between Mitch going down and then trading out Randall and Dante. You know, maybe the minutes are a minute. Maybe the East is just too tough. Maybe I haven't, which is the opposite of what's happened this season. But you'll lay out a bunch of different scenarios, right? The one I never considered was that Mikal Bridges would change his jump shot form midway through his career, and it would lead to this shooting slump where the Knicks, as of right now, traded for RJ, except he doesn't get to the line as much and doesn't pass as well. So I'm not out at all. It's 11 games. It's too early of a sample, but I have to imagine, and this is a softball question, I have to imagine that you're enjoying every bit of these first 11 games of Mikal Bridges' struggles.
I mean, I'm a normal human being. Like, how would I not want to see Mikal Bridges, who I'm sure is a wonderful guy, has nothing to do with him personally. How would I not want to see him fail on a grand scale? Now, my observation about Mikal Bridges is that if I'm you, maybe you don't feel this way. I'm trying to be independently observant when I make this comment. I'd be most disappointed in his defense.
Yes.
Because I think you believe you're acquiring this elite wing defender, and there's been moments, there's been flashes. He hasn't been that guy. And I'm surprised because I would tell you that last year with the Nets, he didn't have a great year. I would tell you that the thing I was most disappointed about Mikal last year was his defense. But I also expected going into this situation, being on this team, where you're not asked to carry the load, you're not asked to be this number one guy, that he would succeed. So I'm surprised that he struggled so far. I would also caution everybody, because I'm not a horrible human, that it is early, that you do need to give it time. But of course I want to see him fail. Like, and here's the other thing. It's not just me being vindictive. It's that I clearly benefit from the Knicks losing. You know, I've explained this to my wife because my wife doesn't understand my dislike for the Knicks. She says, look, I grew up in a Knicks household, hon. My dad's a Knicks fan. My brother's a Knicks fan. Can you tone down your Knicks fan hatred? And I've always tried to show respect in this household for that. But this year I sat her down and said, "Hun, them sucking benefits us." And she's like, "I get it. I understand. I can't even ask you to tone that down, because if it straight up benefits your team and it's not just you being a vindictive small man, then I can't argue with you." So not only, yes, I am a vindictive small man, but I want to see your team struggle for the beneficial reasons that are obvious. But I do caution you guys, it's early. And while there are some warning signs about Mikal not making the threes at the clip you expect, changing his jump shot, the defense being spotty, all that's fair, and you guys should criticize it. It is early, and I have learned we do need to be patient, especially with newish teams, and this is a very newish team.
So Bernard Richardson in the chat, the start of this feels like a trap. A couple days ago, I had someone from Philly on to preview that matchup, and
They're scum. I don't like them
scum.
either.
Yes.
I'm with you guys.
Listen, we all take pleasure in Philly losing at any way, shape, and form, especially in playoff matchups. I know you and I share that as well. Bernard, I'm just going to keep it very real. I know 2 days ago, I gave a platform to someone that gave pro Embiid takes, and I just politely said, I disagree. Here's the real part of this, Bernard. Yes, Evan may be allowed to point out how bad Mikal Bridges has been. I just got to keep it real. I'm right there with him and with a lot of people here at Knicks Film School, because you nailed it with the defense. And it's like the jump shot, I think, will come around. Like
I agree.
He'll go through some streaky moments. Like we saw it to start the season. It was one bad half against Boston, and then 5 to 6 games of a 67 true shooting. And the last 5 games he's been in a slump. What honestly the house of cards is built on, because you trade for Cat not needing a back line of defense that matters. Like you're clearly not going for a rim protector. And look, I'll just give a shout out to the analytics world that like points out that Cat still does some impactful things on the defensive end. He's an elite defensive rebounder. So like you're trying to build not a top 10 defense. You're just trying to be like league average with Cat as your back line of defense. But that's all built on a first line of defense that's impenetrable. And that's where Mikal has to be part of that first line of defense, which is why watching Zach LaVine, not just like the turnaround fadeaways last night, but just back him down and get to the rim on any drive was very concerning.
Well, and he struggled
for a lot of us. Yeah.
He struggled with us. But the reason why I said to Knicks fans, because I do try to be honest sometimes, as dickish as I can be, was that, well, he's being asked to do a lot more. He's always being asked to defend their best offensive player. He's also being asked to be our focal point offensively. So when you think about a guy that plays every game and plays big-ish minutes with the Nets, it's understandable that parts of his game are going to struggle, because you're asking more from him than he's capable of. And one thing I learned about Mikal, I hope differently, because when they first made that trade with Phoenix, I thought, well, you know what? If you give him the opportunity to be a number one, maybe he can prove it. Kind of like what happened with you guys and Jalen Brunson. Give him the opportunity, give him the keys to the castle. He can prove he's a star. I thought early on Mikal could be that guy. He couldn't. By the way, that's not your problem. You don't need him to be a number one or a number two. But I thought the struggles that he faced last year, that you're seeing this year, were explainable by the role that he was in. That's not the answer for his struggles early on this year, because he's being asked to do a hell of a lot less. I also think he's dealing with something that's unfair. He was traded for a package that's not equal to who he is. But here's the good news, Knicks fans. If you win, you don't care, nor should you. If you win, you could give us every pick for the rest of time, and you would say it was worth it. The problem is, if you don't win, you're going to look at that return and say, we gave up that for this. He's a nice player. He's not a game-changing superstar player. And you gave up the kind of package that usually you give up for a superstar. So he's also facing kind of the unreal expectations of what he was traded for.
I agree with you that you have to just take the fact of what he was traded for and the expectations that, like, he got traded for more than what Anthony Davis got traded for. Like, you have to throw that out. The concern, I think, that is building 11 games in is that you're right. If they win, none of that matters. Like, banners fly forever. The problem is his performance is so conducive to how the winning will happen with how this roster is built. So look, I'm hoping that I thought this was a return to Phoenix, that he was going to return to being that third option that was an elite defensive player of the year candidate defense that we saw. And that changes at a certain point, you know.
I do have one theory about it.
What?
And I love the fact he plays every game. Okay, I did as a Net. As a Net fan, like what, especially after what I dealt with. Of course, I want a guy that plays every single game. You look at his body, and you wonder, is it getting to him? I mean, the guy's played a crap ton of basketball over a long period of time. And even the minutes that Tom Thibodeau's kind of thrown on him, I think he's had 3 40-plus minute games already this year. Last year with my team, it was 8. So he's almost at the halfway point. And remember, Bridges plays every game, you know, barring an injury, and I don't root for injuries, as callous as I can be. So I have kind of wondered that last year. Like, that was the discord amongst Net fans. Like, can this guy sit? Basically, that was what we were talking about. Like, maybe he actually needs to sit a game or two. And so playing every game, playing big minutes, I saw that dip last year. It's continuing this year. It's something you just wonder about. And I know a lot of Knicks fans like to play minutes police anyway with Tom Thibodeau, but this is something that happened long before Tom got his hands on him. In fairness, he's played every game, and you see him wearing down. So you just wonder if that's contributed to it.
I'd buy that more if it wasn't like from the Boston game on, that like it wasn't from day one that I was seeing signs of this, like when there was no minutes concern or minutes overload. But this is like the adjustment to a Tibbs workload is probably why it's definitely 11 games in, and we should be more cautious about making any judgments on this. It's the reason why they're 5-6, as far as I'm concerned. Their defense as a total, like they're the 4th best offense in the league. Their defense as a whole has not been good enough to win in more games.
If they had a league average defense, they'd be 3 or 4 games above 500. I agree.
Easily.
And considering that you still have a lot of new pieces, to be that good offensively this early is a great sign. That's a positive. You need the defense to at least get to average. And certainly I thought our expectations were they're going to be a lot better than an average defense. They should be with the talent that they have.
Right. The positive spin I'm putting on all this is I'm expressing all these concerns with you about Mikal, and I do believe they are concerns because the ceiling was contender status.
Yeah.
I still think this is like one of the 4 best teams in the conference, especially in a conference that the Nets may be the 5th best team in the conference.
Let's pipe that one down, all right?
I'm just saying, at this point, the Knicks and Nets have the same number of wins, and it's not that far off for being a 3 seed, Evan. That's how mid this conference has been so far. Look, I'm somewhat playing along with the concerns of Mikal Bridges to help you have a chance to laugh at Big Brother for a little bit. However, I must say, and this is where expectations change, because 5 years ago, your team won the offseason, got a couple of big names in the house, and it was like, okay, the expectations are like championship or bust. Like anything less than that is a failure. 100%. And my team went out with this spunky Julius Randle, Tom Thibodeau, Elfrid Payton led team, and all the expectations went through the roof. That was a 22-win expected team from Vegas, and Tibbs won Coach of the Year, and they won a 4 seed. And now as we transition to the Nets and the expectations have flipped, I'm curious, like the state of the Nets, like, yeah, they're 5-7, and I think the net rating isn't great. They're not like top 10 in anything.
No,
but they look competent. They look competitive, which is, I think, what you want from a young team. Are you enjoying that part of the season, or is it like, oh no, we're winning too much when we're trying to be tanking for Cooper Flag? You know?
No, I'm not a tanker. I've never been a tanker. And I think a part of it is it's the NBA. It's a little different. You're not guaranteed the number 1 pick. I certainly learned that during the John Wall year when I sat through a 70-loss season. And what did it get me? It got me the 3rd pick in the draft. So I think the nature of the sport makes it very different than the NFL, where losing doesn't guarantee you anything. That's number 1. Number 2, even in the NFL, I'm not a tankist. I want to watch my team win. I watch every game, no matter how crappy the team is. I've watched every Net game so far this year, and I sit down and I want to watch my team win. Now, there's a lot of debate amongst us Net fans. I know you people think there's only 9 of us, but there are a few hundred of us.
I gave it to 87. We're at 87 is the number, okay? Yeah.
We debate this because there are some in my community who want to lose, who look at every game and say, we need to lose as many games as possible to get Ace Bailey or Cooper Flag. And I get it. Trust me. But I can't do that. I don't sit watching games hoping for my team to lose. I'll tell you what is different. And I think you're the same way as a diehard fan. Like when you lose to the Chicago Bulls, you probably have a tough night going to sleep. It bothers you, as it should. You're a diehard fan. That's what happens to me as a Nets fan. This year, I can sleep better after losses because I also kind of know, like, what am I freaking out about? So when they blow a game to Boston, and they did, when they blow a game to Cleveland, and they did, I go to bed and I'm like, yeah, it's okay. And you rationalize because of the draft pick. But I want to see my team win. So I've gotten the best of both worlds, right? I've seen them win a few games. I've seen them compete with some of the best. I've seen some youth that I can kind of put my head around and say, maybe they're on my team in the next few years. But I also know the greater picture is they're probably going to be in the lottery. Me rooting for them not to be isn't going to change anything. I want to see them win. I know what the end result is, and I hope they get lucky with ping pong balls, whether they've got the worst record in the league or the 8th worst record in the league. But no, the expectations haven't changed. Like, I don't expect them to be a playoff team because they're 5-7. I think they're well coached. I'm very high on the head coach. I think Jordy has been impressive on a lot of levels, not just the things he says after games, but the way he has this team competing and the way he takes ownership of even the minor mistakes that he makes. I like him. And I think that one thing I am learning, because it's been a while since we tanked, because I don't know if you know this, you can't tank when you don't have your own pick. Mm-hmm. So even when we sucked, we couldn't tank. I think it's very difficult to tank when you have that competent a coaching staff, because if you get your guys to compete on a nightly basis, if you maximize the talent you have, there's a handful of games you're just going to win because you want it more than other NBA teams. So it's a good thing because I'm very high on the coach and I believe maybe we found our guy. But if you are someone that wants to rack up the losses, it contradicts it, because when you're that well coached, there are going to be some wins you steal.
So like I said, the we hear Knicks of Julius Randle of 1920, there was an outcry throughout that year from Knicks fans that like this was supposed to be a tanking season, that like these wins are fun and we're going to get the almighty 4th seed. But like Cade Cunningham was at the top of this draft and Evan Mobley was at the top of this draft. And I went back and forth on it, and I think there's a push and pull in me that's like, yes, the math does probably favor you wanting to be toward the top of the draft than toward the middle of the lottery, but also like there's a culture building aspect to showing how competent you are, and that I think is what that was built that season, that an expectation or a floor at least was built, which is I don't know. You tell me how much of that is being built in Brooklyn right now.
It feels like it is. I mean, I think the compete level is there almost every night. They didn't compete that well in the second half against Boston last night, and Jordy Fernandez comes out right after the game and kills everybody. I mean, I was thinking to myself, can you coach the Jets? Like, that's kind of something we need.
It's more than a coach. More than a coach, Evan.
Well,
I know what you're saying.
I was, and Tiki was disagreeing with me, but I was kind of lamenting that Jeff Ulbrich, much like Robert Saleh, runs a country club with his players. Mm-hmm. And Tiki, as a former player, basically was like, nah, that's not what's going on. I'm like, okay, fine. As a fan, that's the way it feels. And then that night, my basketball head coach comes out after a game in which they lost to the best team in the sport and basically says, hey, that effort was unacceptable. That's what he said after a loss to the best team in the NBA, who, by the way, was coming off a loss the night before and had competed with them 5 days earlier. Bro, that was the most obvious blowout loss in the history of sports when you're playing the Celtics off a loss, off of competing with them 5 days earlier with Jaylen Brown back in the lineup. Like, what are we talking about? And yet the coach felt, I'm going to call everybody out after the game. So I do think that builds some kind of culture. And I say this very carefully because I don't want you to think I'm falling into the same trap. I also think that if you want to attract players to come here, and I'm not saying the Nets should just trade for a superstar or dare go after any free agent that's available, but you also always want to be appealing. You want to have that be an option. I think you need to show your competence. So, yeah, I like that they're winning games. I like that they're competing. And then, when they don't make the playoffs, I'm going to sit there with a glass of, very strong alcohol and hope to the basketball gods that we get lucky and win a lottery, while people tell me, well, you would have had better odds if you lost that Tuesday night to the Grizzlies. And it's like, I know, I get it, you're right, but I want to win. Like tomorrow night against the Knicks, oh my God, do I want to kick that ass. Oh,
I mean, you get two chances this weekend. And look, I was talking about it with my colleague Benji Ritholtz on the post game last night. Like the noise around Mikal is going to get really loud from the Knicks side of things if he has one or two stinkers this weekend, and God forbid they walk away with one or two losses as well. So we'll see what happens. Two things in follow up to what you said. First of all, the way the East is, the Nets could go like 28-54, and that's the 10 seed. Like that's just the reality of what the East is at the moment. That a 55-loss team could make the play-in, quote unquote.
Let's say that happens. Let's say you're right, and I think that creates such a weird predicament. So they win 29 games, they're in the play-in tournament. Dude, I'm telling you, a lot of Net fans are going to root for them to lose. Because, again, think about what happens. If you win, you're in the playoffs to get just destroyed by the Celtics. If you lose, you're in the lottery, right?
Right.
I think that's going to create, like, the worst discourse in the history of sports because it is not in my DNA. You could tell me all day the Celtics are going to sweep you, and they probably are. It is not in my DNA to sit there in a 10-9 game against the Pistons and say, I want to lose. Imagine that in a play-in game. It's one thing to feel that way in the middle of December or November. You're going to do that in a play-in game? So I hope you're wrong because I think that's so horrible for sports if that's what happens.
Well, so it's even more of a risk though, because it's not even so much like you go into the playoffs or the lottery. Because of the lottery still being ranked by record, you could be like the 8th worst record.
Correct.
And still have a chance to go in the playoffs or have the 8th best lottery odds, which to your point forces you to be like, the risk is just not worth the reward to make the playoffs here.
What we would need to have happen, and I know this sounds really foreign to you guys, and I understand it's going to sound disrespectful, but just hear me out. We would need the Nets, 29 wins, they're the 10 seed, and the 9 seeds the Knicks. Now, if that's the case, it'll be very easy for Net fans to rally around the screw the draft pick, send their asses to the lottery because, oh, yeah, we have your pick.
You have your pick, yeah. So send the Knicks odds.
Bang.
I want to entertain this world. Hold on. I created this. It's a monster. My apologies, Knicks fans. The other question or follow-up I wanted to ask, because you mentioned, the moves, the potential free agent destinations. And according to Bill Simmons, you're getting Giannis. So I'm not even going to go down that road of how realistic that is. But I am curious who the keepers are on this team and whether there is an all-in nuclear button that they press. We've got some questions in the chat asking about like when that button is pressed, whether you want it to end up being like a fire sale at some point. Who in your mind are the keepers at the moment?
Well, the closest thing to a keeper is Cam Thomas.
Okay.
But I admit I love Cam. I can't guarantee it. Like, I can't tell you, oh, there's no way I'd move Cam Thomas in the right trade. So I think that there are tiers here, right? There's tier number one. You have a chance to be a part of the answer, right? Cam Thomas certainly leads that. To a degree, Nicholas Claxton's a part of that. He's been here for a while. He just got the contract. So I think Nick's a part of he could absolutely be a part of the future. We could also trade him in the middle of January. You've got guys who are trying to prove themselves. I mean, Zaire Williams has been unbelievable. As a wing defender, a lot better than Mikal Bridges, by the way. He's been outstanding. Now, can I tell you he's a keeper moving forward? No, but I can say he's auditioning. He's impressive. He's a guy that maybe can be a bit piece on a team that finds that answer. Jalen Wilson is another example of it. Noah Clowney is certainly a young project that for now is probably a part of the future because I'm not looking to trade him. So you're looking to develop him and see him get better. Then you've got the veterans that, come on, they're not going to. DFS, I love Dorian Finney-Smith. He's a nice, but come on. You're going to trade him at the deadline. You have to. Cam Johnson, I know he just signed the big contract. You're going to trade him. Dennis Schroeder. I mean, Dennis Schroeder's been, I can't believe this because I never thought of this watching him. I always hated Dennis Schroeder. He got into a little scuffle with Kyrie Irving a few years ago. And of course, I was on Kyrie's side, of course. And Dennis Schroeder's like a great culture guy. I can't believe it. He loves Brooklyn. He's embraced it. And he's shown great leadership. I mean, I think you guys probably saw the video of him coming to the defense of Ben Simmons. It's not about defending Ben Simmons. It's that he took it upon himself to say, hey, that's my guy. You don't talk about my guy. So I like what Dennis is doing. you're going to trade him in all likelihood if the right deal comes along. So you've got those tiers of guys who can be a part of the culture of the future, be a part of the future, and then guys who, come on, they're here, they're playing well, and maybe them being here benefits others. Oh, by the way, then there's the other tier, the tier of there's no way in hell you're on my team ever again. And you know who's in that tier. His name is Benjamin Aloysius Simmons.
Ah, okay. Full name, full government
Full name, yes.
Gotcha. Well, funny how that went from like getting him for James Harden and neither team like is happy with how that trade went. That was like the blockbuster trade of 2 years or 3 years ago at the deadline. And it ends up being a nothing burger. It's
funny. There are trades in which everyone's a loser, kind of like that trade. There's a trade where everyone's a winner, which if we're being peaceful, that's what we hope this Mikal Bridges trade is. You guys win. These picks eventually turn out to be great. We build a winner. It can be a win-win. Like, it's possible. It's kind of like, to me, the Ram-Lion trade of Jared Goff and picks for Matthew Stafford. Like, that's the ultimate win-win. First of all, the Rams already won a Super Bowl. That's over for them. And the Lions have built themselves a hell of a team. So that's a win-win. That trade, though, the Harden, Simmons, Andre Drummond, Seth Curry, we forget those pieces. That's the ultimate fart in the wind kind of trade. I can't wait till Ben's off my team. I really can't.
So, you say that, but if this ends in a buyout, which I like, there is that scenario where this ends in a buyout where nobody wants him. I know it's an expiring contract. I just don't know the team that wants to take on that salary. I guess a team can use the salary and then buy him out. There's like a world where I'd entertain him for the minimum with the Knicks. The biggest worry is Tibbs trotting out like Josh Hart, Ben Simmons, Precious Achiuwa lineups and being like, those are my wings. I have to. Who cares about spacing? I wonder if him as like your backup 3, but he's like running your backup offense. But then that also takes the ball out of Deuce McBride's hands. What are your thoughts on him as like on the minimum? Is that value still there?
I think that you can always, first of all, one thing we need to separate, and I think you've done it, is you forget about his resume, you forget about the past expectations, you forget about the salaries.
Bingo.
See, his salary's on my books, right? So, of course, when I think of Ben Simmons, I think of what he's making. I think of what the expectation was when you traded for him. Once you become a buyout guy, once you're bouncing around the league and you're making the league minimum, it just strictly comes down to, can that guy help me for 10 minutes a night? That's really it. I mean, you almost have to look at him the same way you look at Matt Ryan, who you brought in. Like, okay, is he productive for the 8 minutes he's on the floor? Now, I think that's tough to do sometimes because a guy's got such a name that you can't look past it. You keep thinking Ben Simmons. He's afraid to shoot. He's this, he's that. Okay, yes, I think that way. Sixer fans think that way. You guys think that way as an opponent. But I think once you're in the buyout market, you just have to view the guy as, can that guy help me for a limited amount of time? Do I think he can help an NBA team in a very limited role? Sure. I'm okay with just letting it expire. I mean, the guy barely plays anyway. He misses half the season. So, there's no rush to buy him out or trade him unless there's something of value that helps me in the future. You may as well just take your medicine and let it expire at the end of the year and just move the hell on.
He's Clutch, right? That's his agency? He's a Clutch client?
Yes, I thought for a second. You're like,
no.
Clutch.
He doesn't have the Clutch gene. No. He doesn't have the Clutch gene. I assume in the politics of the NBA, if he gets a buyout, it's because I'm going to do a favor to Clutch to be nice to you. Like the Knicks have had to learn that the hard way with the whole Cam Reddish thing.
Sean Marks used to do that all the time. Like before they got Durant and Kyrie Irving, they would do these tiny little favors for all the agents so that they could, basically kiss the ring, and then hopefully get rewarded in the future. And for some reason, I don't really know why the Nets have still, after this debacle, been linked to stars, whether it was Damian Lillard and now Giannis. And you kind of look around. I look around as a Net fan and say, well, why is that? Did the organization do something so well that stars are still at least somewhat intrigued by coming to the Nets? I don't know the answer.
Well, we're here with Evan Roberts here on the Knicks Film School Pregame Pod. Got a couple of questions before I let you get out of here. The first one from our live chat comes from fellow Mets fan as well, Mr. Kevin Danishevsky. He says, Ev, thoughts on the Vince Carter number retirement?
I understand it for the generation that loved Vince Carter. I had a love-hate relationship with Vince as a player. I think that always happens when you bring in a superstar. To me, I can't get over. I don't know if anyone's going to remember this game, but I'm going to tell you. They were playing the Cavs in the 2007 Eastern Conference semifinals. That was the year that LeBron finally got to the finals. And they were down 3-1 in the series. They won game 5. They were playing game 6 in New Jersey. So they had a chance to force a 7th game. And they were down early, and Jason Kidd in the third quarter had one of the great quarters you'll ever see and carried them back into the game. Meanwhile, Vince had done nothing. And I remember turning to the guy I was with that night, and I said, this is where Vince Carter has to prove who he is. Jay Kidd just brought you back in the game. You got a chance to force this thing back to Cleveland for a 7th game. You need to be our hero. And he failed. He came up very, very small in the fourth quarter of the game. And it always kind of – thank you. I left my wallet around the studio. Thank you very much. Jeez.
Whoever did that, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. And it always left a sour taste in my mouth. As the years went on, I thought back to the Vince era, and I felt better. I liked how he was a good veteran leader as they were transitioning. And I liked that he sort of saved us after the decision to let Kenyon Martin go, which I thought was a bad one. So I like Vince. Do I think it's jersey retirement? Probably not selfishly. But I also talked to a lot of Net fans who are about 8 or 9 years younger than me. They loved him. He was like the face of that generation. To me, it's getting to the NBA Finals. It's Jason Kidd. It's Kenyon Martin. It's Richard Jefferson. So I understand it. I kind of feel that way a lot with some of the Met retirements lately, where I'm not against it. I'm not going to sit here and scream and tell you it's stupid, but I think it's for someone else. It's not necessarily for me. But I've grown to appreciate and accept what Vince did for our team.
If I can, you gave me the softball of talking Mets, and if I could just, the Mets retirements lately are because a guy who grew up watching the Mets in the 80s or came of his wealth watching the Mets in the 80s, where maybe some psychotics were going on, is bought the Mets and now wants to retire every 86 Met known to man in his number. Like Gary Carter's next, Ron Darling's next.
I don't think it's going to go that far. But
I do. I think we're getting.
They're not going to retire Ron
Davey
Darling.
Johnson's getting a day. Tim Tuffle's getting a day. Like Ray Knight's getting a day. I'm telling you, this is going to be a whole wall outlining of 86 Mets. You know,
I've learned to understand other people's opinions, even if I don't agree with them. Now, maybe I'm a hypocrite. I'm going to be at Vince Carter's retirement ceremony. Like, I'm bringing the whole family. I'm going to tell the story to my kids about who Vince Carter was. It also kind of bothered me that the Raptors jumped the line. Like, I didn't like that. The Nets announced they were retiring his number. They announced it. And then the Raptors, like, months later, were like, oh, we're going to do it. And we're going to do it before you. And now you've got the meme of him crying, the ovation. It was like, dude, you guys weren't going to do it until we did it. And to me, it's going to make the Net retirement look small. So that kind of bothered me.
I get it. Thank you, Kevin, for the question. Next, and this is where I think a lot of Knicks fans are in their frustration today, but from David Katz, is it too early to have a conversation about accepting the L on Bridges and looking for a trade? Bridges and Mitchell Robinson for Herb Jones and Trey Murphy III. First of all, if the Pelicans are offering that, I have questions about both Herb Jones and Trey Murphy III's injury histories. Because the one thing Evan did point out about Mikal Bridges is that he plays. Like, may not play well, he plays. So we have 3 injury-prone guys, and the one guy going out that plays is going to the other team. The answer to this question is yes. And I think you've said it as much. It is way too early to start thinking about whether this is an L or not. He's not even on his next contract. He's still on a very valuable deal, and it's 11 games in where everything around him is different.
You can't accept an L. You can't trade him just because you want to get rid of him. But if a deal came along that you think makes you better, then
if the Mavericks are offering Luka tomorrow, yes,
right.
you trade. Like right. I'm not saying he's untouchable. That contract's still valuable.
Correct. That's the difference.
The accepting of an L, yeah.
It's not that you can't trade him. It's that you can't accept an L. Right, Boomer? I have to go on mute. Boomer wants to talk to me. It's very important.
Okay. Well, I'll just
give me 1 second.
I'll just answer a question real quick, and then I'll just answer this real quick. So David Katz, I'll just say this on my behalf. It's way too early. It's 11 games in. It's impossible to know what this team's going to look like 2 months from now, 3 months from now. I've preached patience. We've all preached patience so far this season. I think personally, I made this comp the other night. The Cavaliers of 2014-15, the year LeBron first went back, was the year that we all looked at and said, that took a while to get used to things going. And they started 19-20 and eventually finished 53-29. Now they had some moves that they made, which is why the Knicks may have to shake things up at a certain point. But like so much has changed for it to be accepting L's at the moment. So I would again I open the show conceding that I'm very frustrated with Mikal Bridges so far this year, but we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that here he is. Evan Roberts is back. I got bumped for Boomer Esiason. I've been it's been much bigger names have no. I'll say it. It's an acceptable bump. I'll say that much.
Yes, we needed to have a brief conversation. We're all good.
Okay, good.
Much. What were we talking about? Mikal Bridges being
bad? Yes, there you go. So I guess last question before I let you get out of here, because I know you're a busy man and your show starts in an hour and a half. I'd just be remiss if I didn't ask, like, where's your head at with the Juan Soto sweepstakes? I know a lot of Mets and Yankees fans are listening at the moment.
So I've gone back and forth. I have to admit. There's two things. There's, do I think they're going to get him? And then there's my message to Steve Cohen. My message to Steve Cohen is you better be the highest bidder. Like, why are you here? This is the free agent you've been waiting for. This is the guy we've been waiting for. So I will be very pissed off, very disappointed, very angry, especially as a season ticket holder, if they don't come away with the highest bid. You want to tell me he took less to stay with the Yankees? I get it. You want to tell me he takes less to go wherever the hell he wants to go? Fine. So, number one, I have an expectation and a demand that they are the highest bidder for Juan Soto. Then it goes back to, are we going to get him? And here's where I get mixed emotions. When has Steve Cohen proven that yet? When has he gone out there? Now, you could argue maybe the right guy hasn't been there. Ohtani didn't want to come here, all that. So we're asking him to do something we haven't seen yet. So I would say my confidence level is a little bit below 50%, but I'm kind of getting anxious because the Mets can still have a good offseason. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they can't succeed without Juan Soto, but I'm going to be annoyed. And I think you're going to be annoyed. I think most of us are going to be annoyed if we aren't there as the highest bidder going balls to the wall to get this guy on our team.
That's largely where I ended up. I'll be at peace if they're the highest bidder and he takes a lower offer. I think the pattern Cohen's also shown is once he gets spurned by that first free agent, he just rage spends. Like that first year, Steven Matz decides to sign with the Cardinals. All right, Max Scherzer, Starling Marte, Mark Canha, Edgardo Escobar. Like you're coming down. Even when DeGrom left, okay, the following week, Verlander, Nimmo's back, Senga would have signed Carlos Correa if not for a bad x-ray. The difference here is that first one, I think, determines how high the ceiling is of the offseason. So if he gets spurned on this, he may go rage spend, and it's like, all right, Corbin Burns, Pete Alonso, you're back. Like another pitcher, like you name it, he might go get him, but it's still not Soto, you know?
Right. That's a good offseason. Like to go out and get the best pitcher available, to bring Pete back, maybe add another bat. Like no one's saying that's a bad offseason. But you're talking about a guy who's 26 years old, prime of his career, maybe the Ted Williams of our generation, and you didn't get him. Anyone else, they're not him. So it's going to be massively disappointed. We're going to be massively disappointed if we don't get him. But, listen, I'm a Net fan. You're a Knicks fan. Aren't we used to being massively disappointed? Isn't that our lives?
We are. I'm hoping not to be disappointed this weekend. That's for sure. I need a 3. Baby. It's 100% on us. I need a 3 for 4 from 3 night from Mikal. On Friday night, and then a 5 for 6 night, and he makes the game-winning stop against Cam Thomas on Sunday. Okay?
I need a victory so badly. I'm going to the Garden for both games. I'm taking my son on Friday. I'm taking my wife, little date night on Sunday, and I just one win. That's it. Just give me one win because you guys are so overconfident. You got to hear what people say around the office. Oh, we're going to sweep the Nets. It's not going to even be close. So I need it. I need it so freaking badly. And you Knicks fans, it's going to sting. You may say you don't care. Trust me, you'll care.
I will just admit I very much care this weekend. I cannot have that in my life this weekend. That panic. Because if this was a home and home against the Hornets or the Wizards,
different.
It's like, who cares? Like whatever. Like they're still getting used to each other. I'm learning, they're learning, whatever. if the Brooklyn narrative becomes a thing, then it becomes very loud because after the Brooklyn game, I believe they have a back-to-back on Monday against Washington or Charlotte, one of the bad teams. And then they go on this West Coast trip. So at least they get out of town for a little bit. But I just to spell some angst and some worry amongst the fan base that's already a little bit disappointed. They really need to.
And the one I want is Friday. I want Friday because A, my 8-year-old's going to be there. I think it'll teach him a nice lesson. And B, maybe I'm a dope. I want that tournament win, baby.
Oh, that's right. It's the NBA Cup is on Friday. Well, right. Evan Roberts, thank you so much for joining me. And I say this as lovingly as possible. I hope you and your family have a miserable weekend at Madison Square Garden. Whether it be, it's Jet that's going with you.
That is right.
On Friday, right? Yes. Whether it's you and your son on Friday or you and your wife on Sunday. I hope you have the worst time possible at the world's most famous arena, while recognizing that I hope you had a good time today here at Knicks Film School.
I appreciate that. Always an honor. Thank you very much.
Awesome. You can check out Evan in about an hour and 15 minutes on WFAN, or you go live at 4 on SNY, right? That's usually
4 o'clock on SNY, 2 o'clock on the Fan or the Odyssey app. So yes, thank you.
There you go. Thank you so much, Evan, for joining me. And thank you everybody for tuning in for another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show. If you dig the show, please head over to iTunes, drop a 5-star rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video. Remember to subscribe. I will be back on Monday to preview the Knicks' next matchup, again live at noon before the game. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Let's go Knicks. Take care of business this weekend, and I will speak with you soon. Peace.